Namaskar दोस्तों, welcome to channel Toxicology on Board. Today in this video we'll be discussing another DABT topic, that is food additives. So this question is taken from a ABT recertification exam, that is May 12, 2000, and I also try to see whether this particular question or concept is there in the current DABT brochure. So you also go back and check DABT brochure 2025, in which there are two sections will be there. One will be DABT syllabus, another will be DABT toxicology references. Under that, you try to see whatever the slides which we are going to discuss today, whether they are there or not. But I try to collate it. It is given in the page number 17, 24, 30. It is given under DDEF, excipients, species difference, factors, USDA. These are the important topics which are given under DABT brochure. And also, I have listed out certain guidelines like application quantitative data to develop data derived extrapolation factor. This is nothing but DDEF, and also I have listed out the important frequently asked questions under GRAS, that is generally regarded as safe, and that is under FDA only, and other toxicology principles with respect to food ingredients. So also read about Red Book 2000. Okay, so let's directly dive into the question. The question is, which of the following is true regarding food additives? Okay, so we have to go through these statements and identify which is applicable to the food additives. The first statement is, for regulatory purposes, food additives include only those substances added to food and for functional purpose. Actually, this statement is not true because it is not only for functional purposes. Okay, for that reason, the statement is not applicable to the food additive. Second one statement is, the Delaney Amendment, Delaney clause is there. So you read in detail about that clause of Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act. It prohibited the use of any food additive which has been shown to cause carcinogenic, mutagenic, teratogenic effect in laboratory animals. This statement is also not right because Delaney clause is specifically applicable to the excipients or food additives which are carcinogenic in nature. It is not applicable for mutagenic and teratogenic because we have separate guidelines or separate sections which are taking care of this particular type of adverse effect. For this reason, this statement is also not applicable for the food additives. Next, the third statement is, the FDA normally applies a 100-fold safety factor to the Noel obtained in appropriate animal toxicology studies. So you will always come across, whenever you are doing risk assessment, no, you will come across this terminology called safety factor, uncertainty factor, modifying factor. These type of you will be coming across. So particularly in the case of food additives, they are using 100-fold safety factor whenever a Noel is available for that particular food additive. So this statement is right. For the risk assessment of the food additives, the FDA normally applies 100-fold safety factor, but always try to understand, for any rule there will be certain exceptions. What are those exceptions? We'll read in the next slide. Next, we'll see what was the statement D. Food additives are regulated by Department of Agriculture under the Pure Food Act. So this particular Pure Food Act is no longer there. Earlier, before FDA 1938 or like the Pure Food Act was in 1906 actually, and it comes under this Department of Agriculture. So this statement is also not applicable for the food additives. We'll discuss in detail each and every statement. One slide I prepared in the presentation so that you will understand in detail. Even if there is no detectable migration of packaging component into the food, the packaging component is still considered to be food additive. So whatever the food you are there in which you are packaging, no, if that from that package any food is leaching into the any packaging material is leaching into the food, will that be considered as food additive? No, that is the reason it doesn't come fit into the definition of food additive. Okay, so we'll see each and every statement. As I told you, please go and check in the case of DABT brochure under syllabus as well as toxicology reference section. They have listed out all these particular topics in which this particular presentation or this concept will fall into. So it is a part of your syllabus and references. So let's discuss in detail each and every statement. Statement A was, for regulatory purposes, food additives include only those substances added to food for functional purposes. As I told you, it is not for functional purposes only. So exclusively those substances only. This is why this statement is false. So let's see what further explanation we have. If let us understand what is the definition of food additive which is given by the regulatory agency. If you look into food additive, no, we have FDA defines the food additive as any substances that is intended to use of which results or may reasonably be expected to result directly or indirectly. So food additives are two types are there: direct additive, indirect additive, in it becoming a component or otherwise affecting the characteristic of any food. The nature of the food should not be if it is affecting or not, that we have to see. So we have direct additives, food additives, and indirect additives. In coming to direct food additives, we have these are the substances which are intentionally added at the time of food packaging. These substances are intentionally added to food to achieve a specific technological or functional effect. What are the examples are preservation, to preserve the food, enhance the coloring, flavoring or texturing of that particular food. So please go back and read what are the examples which falls under direct food additives. Coming to indirect food additives, substances that are not intentionally added. They are not intentional, but they become a part of that food, but may become a component of food in trace amount, minute amounts during the packaging, during storage or during processing. So components of packaging material migrate into the food. So this was something related to the last option. So we'll see. So what are the key exceptions? As I told you, for any statement, for any rule, you have certain exceptions. What are the exceptions which falls under this one? We'll see. While the definition is broad, whatever the food additive definition which is given by the FDA or any regulatory agency, it is broad. Certain substances that are added for functional purposes are legally excluded from regulatory definition. What of a food additive? What are those? We'll see list out. In some jurisdictions like US, because they fall under different regulatory framework, those substances need to be regulated by other regulatory framework. So what are those? First one is GRAS. So it is GRAS is also part of DABT your syllabus. So GRAS is generally regarded as safe. So ingredients which are falling under, which are already having GRAS status, FDA will give to certain substances GRAS status. So for them, that will not fall under this food additive this thing. Second one is color additives. Color additives, they are controlled by other type of regulatory guideline or framework. So these have their own specific set of regulations and pre-market approval requirements. So those color additives or coloring dyes which are already approved by the FDA or regulatory agencies, those only can be part of a component in the food products. So third one is pesticides and new animal drugs. They are also not a part of food additives because they are regulated under separate. So pesticides ke liye we have a FIFRA guideline will be there, that is FIFRA, and other pesticide related guidelines, US EPA pesticide related guidelines are there. So go back and check what are the regulatory agencies which are controlling pesticides. Okay, this was about the option A. So now we'll see statement B. Statement B is what was the statement B? Statement B was the Delaney Amendment of Food, Drugs and Cosmetic Act. It prohibited the use of any food additive which has been shown to be carcinogenic, mutagenic, teratogenic in the laboratory animals. As I told you, Delaney clause is only applicable to carcinogenic, mutagenic and teratogenic. They are handled by other type of regulatory guidelines or framework. So that is the reason this statement B is false. It is not applicable to food additive. So let's understand in brief what is Delaney clause. See, the Delaney clause, it is an amendment to the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act of 1938. So what does this Delaney clause will do? It will prohibit the additives, whatever the food additives are there, no, if that food additive is having carcinogenic in nature, shown to cause cancer, it does not explicitly extend this zero tolerance mandate to mutagenic or teratogenic. So this mutagenic and teratogenic characteristic, they do not fall under Delaney clause. So what are the key details regarding the Delaney clause include? First one is specific scope. The clause, whatever this clause is, no Delaney clause, it is explicitly states that no additive shall be deemed to be safe. It is found to induce cancer when ingested in either man or better in the animal. So the food additive should not have any carcinogenic in nature. That is the thing. That is the major thing. Second one is testing criteria. How it triggers a ban. This Delaney clause will cause a ban if a substance is found to be carcinogenic through tests which are appropriate for the evaluation of safety of food additives. Generally, we will do 2-year carcinogenicity will be there in rodents. So in that, if they have found that this particular substance is having carcinogenic nature, as per Delaney clause, you have to ban that particular food additive. Third one is other toxic effects. While mutagenicity, that is damage to the DNA, and teratogenicity, birth defects are critical factors. They are of severe and these are irreversible type of toxicological adverse effects these are, but they do not fall under Delaney clause. Are critical factors in the FDA's broader safety evaluation for food additives. They fall under the general safety standards of the act rather than a specific absolute prohibition by this Delaney clause. For that reason, this particular statement is false. Next one, coming to enforcement of this particular Delaney clause, the FDA remains active in enforcing this clause. How? The best example, the recent Jan 2025 FDA, what it has done, it has revoked the authorization of this color additive red number 3 based on what they have found that this particular color additive red number 3 is carcinogenic. They found some positive carcinogenic findings with respect to this particular red number 3 dye. As a result, they have banned this particular dye and this particular color additive is no longer a part of food products. So this is the person Claude Delaney is the person after which this particular clause is been termed. Next, we'll see statement C. Coming to statement C, what is the statement C? The FDA normally applies a 100-fold safety factor to the novel obtained in appropriate animal toxicity states. Yes, this is particularly for food additives. The uncertainty factor, the correction factor with respect to novel, you have to use 100. The answer is right. So we'll further read in detail what is this uncertainty factor, modifying factor in the next 1 or 2 slides. This statement is true as a general rule, particularly in the context of food safety and certain drug assessments. Okay, because drug assessments you have something called interspecies and intraspecies factor. So pharmacology students or pharmacology people, they use 10/2 by default 100 safety factor is there. Okay, so however the specific factor can vary based on the type of the product and the regulatory context. As I said, no, for any rule there will be certain exceptions will be there. So which type of regulatory filing and which type of chemical you are handling, based on that these factors may either increase or decrease. So we'll see what are those. Okay, key details of this 100-fold safety factor. The FDA typically applies a default 100 safety factor to the novel found in animal studies. So you do have typical 28-day or 90-day or 1-year toxicology study. You repeat those toxicology study you do. You end up with a dose descriptor, point of departure novel. To that you are applying uncertainty or correction factor, that is 100. What you are doing, you are extrapolating, you are establishing a safe human exposure level. Okay, so like that of acceptable daily intake in the case of food additives. Okay, ADI is the thing for the food additives. Okay, so this 100-fold safety factor, it is derived from two components. What are those? One is interspecies factor, second one is intraspecies factor. Interspecies factor is 10-fold, intraspecies factor is also 10-fold. Interspecies factor means in between mice, rat, or in between mice and human, rat and human, dog or human, monkey or human. Okay, in between two different species. So account for potential differences in sensitivity between the test animal species as well as the human. Okay, so this is called interspecies variation. Coming to intraspecies variation, account for differences in sensitivity among the diverse human population. If me and you are there, even though both of us are human, still there will be some differentiation will be there, biological differentiation will be there, PK difference, pharmacokinetic difference will be there. So to in order to address that difference, in order to address that uncertainty within the two different humans, we have to apply an additional uncertainty factor, that is called intraspecies factor. So which in example are age, genetics, human health status, etc. So this is the pictorial diagram, interspecies and intraspecies. Okay, So let us in detail understand what are the other exceptional area where more than 100-fold safety factor is used. So while the 100-fold safety factor is a common standard, FDA adjusts it based on certain specific circumstances. So we have seen under food additives, you have certain code of federal regulation is there that will include 100-fold safety factor. That is a general rule. Coming to clinical drug trials, so in your brochure also they have given you one under syllabus they have given you one guideline, first in human dose. Okay, in that you have to calculate HED, human equivalent dose. How that human HED you are getting? You are getting it from Noel by applying certain adjustment factors. Okay, so in order to derive that maximum recommended starting dose or first in human dose in order to initiate phase 1 trial, no, so there generally you are using 10-fold safety factor you are using. Okay, but I will tell you, you go back and read another important case study, that is cytochrome storm was observed in the case of phase 1 trial in the case of TGN 11 11 4 14 1412 is the drug which is a clinical trial drug in which 6 patients undergo. They started the trial and the patient immediately showed cytokine storm. So this about this cytokine storm, no, it is also mentioned in the DABT brochure under that particular sections like Bhopal gas tragedy after thalidomide strategy. They have mentioned about this cytokine storm. So please go back and read that one case study, that is TGN 1412. The major failure of that particular trial was that all the 6 patients underwent immediate emergency because they later on felt that the starting dose, the Noel which they have selected to initiate to extrapolate to first in human dose or HED, no, they have considered 10 factor. But those receptors were they have done in a certain species, but those in the receptors, the same receptors to which this particular drug will bind was absent in that particular species, but it was available in the human. Then they realized that certain situations, particularly for biotechnology derived product, no, 10-fold factor is not enough. We have to go for higher fold factor. So 100-fold factor can be used in the case of such cases. So please go back and read that particular case also. And we have other examples for higher factors. We have when you're whenever see used if the toxicology data is limited, so whenever there is a data scarcity is there, still the drug a certain chemical or a drug is under investigational stage, so you don't have all the complete set of data set. You will not have single dose, repeat dose, 28-day, 90-day, 1 year, 2 year, reproductive fertility. So when you don't have that, there is a database incompleteness is there. At that time you can use for to address that uncertainty, you can use higher factors, so up to 1000 also you can use. Okay, so that is another case is there, particularly for investigational IMP or certain impurities can be also you will be using. And lower factors can be used whenever there is a same class of chemical is there, then we already know about the risk. In such cases you can use for lower factors. So smaller factors may be applied when the drug belongs to well characterized class or when human metabolism of substance is already well understood. So these are the certain places, so certain exceptions, certain cases where the factors can 100 say can be decreased or can be increased. So also read in DABT brochure 2025 page number 30 and 31. They have given the importance of this one, how to calculate, because this is a part of syllabus. Tolerable intake, then OEL, occupational exposure limit, DNEL, acute exposure, AGEL values, PAL values are there. So all these are coming by applying this NOEL, considering one point of departure which is the safest dose and extrapolating and dividing and establishing and deriving a safe human safety limit. So I have you can pause the video there and see that how there are certain formulas I have given where uncertainty factors can be considered. Also it is given in the case of HBL, ICH Q3C as well as ICH Q3D guideline. Also various factors have been discussed, different F1 and F2 factors are there. So you can pause the video, read this guideline, the quality guidelines, the Q3A, Q3B, C, ICH M7, the ISO guidelines, these are also part of DABT syllabus only. So okay, so very quickly I will run through safety factor definition as well as another modifying factor definition. So coming to safety factor, a composite reductive factor applied by the risk assessment experts to the NOEL or the reference point such that benchmark dose. There is another concept called, apart from NOEL, something called benchmark dose, which is statistically derived by taking the data from group of studies. Okay, so to derive a reference dose that is considered safe without acceptable appreciable risk, such as acceptable daily intake or tolerable daily intake, you will be calculating. Okay, so then the value of the safety factor depends on the nature of the toxic effect, whether it is irreversible or irreversible, or it is serious or non-serious, size and the type of the population. If the guidelines say 10 animals per sex per dose, and if you are using 5 animals or 3 animals per sex per dose, at that time you have to use higher safety factor, and the quality of the toxicology information available, whether it is GLP study or non-GLP study, based on that also you have to decide whether the factor has to be increased or decreased. Coming to modifying factor, it is an individual factor determined by the professional judgment of a toxicologist. This is particularly applicable to the bioassay data. Here, the modifying factor, the range might be from 0 to less than or equal to 10. By default, you can use it 1. Particularly, this modifying factor is used for completeness of overall database or number of species tested. If the testing has to be done in 2 species, rodent and non-rodent, if only it is done in rodent, then at that time you have to use modifying factor. Okay, now let's directly dive into statement D. Statement D, food additives are regulated by Department of Agriculture under the Food Act. So this statement is also not applicable to food additives. So why we'll see, we'll detailedly understand what is Department of Agriculture and Pure Food Act in this particular slide. So coming to food additives, as in the US, primarily regulated by FDA. FDA is the agency which is regulating the food additives. Okay, under Department of Health and Human Sciences and Department of Agriculture. These are the two agencies which are regulating the food additives. So while the statement contains historical elements, but it is not completely, it is incorrect for the following reasons. Why it is not applicable to food additives, you'll see. One is governing law. The primary legislation for food additives is Federal Food and Drug Cosmetic Act 1938 and its subsequent 1958 Food Additive Amendment. These are the important you have to remember. 1938, 1958. Pure Food Act, no, it is Pure Food. Officially, it was Pure Food and Drug Act 1906. As I told you, 1906, first major federal law, but was largely replaced by this 1938 Act. So no longer this 1906 Act is there. Regulatory agency, FDA has primary legal responsibility for determining the safe use of this food additives. Okay, and coming to USDA, that is US Department of Agriculture role, it will oversee the safety and labeling of the meat, poultry, certain egg. So whatever the veterinary derived food products are, the meat, poultry, and the egg, they will come under the regulation of this USDA. So while the USDA Food Safety and Inspection Services (FSIS) share responsibility for the additives used specifically in these products, that is meat, poultry, and egg, all additive must first be evaluated and approved for the safety by the FDA. Okay, even though USDA is working along with FDA, first all these additives have to be approved by the FDA. Historical context, if you see, enforcement of this particular 1906 Pure Food Act originally fell under Bureau of Chemistry Act, okay, within the USDA. However, Bureau eventually evolved into the FDA, which was transferred out to USDA and now resides under the Department of Health and Human Services. So this might be little bit of and you have to remember with respect to act and the years. So let's see the last statement, that is statement E. Statement E, even if there is no detectable migration of packaging component into the food, the packaging component is still considered as food additive. No, this particular statement is false statement because this doesn't fall under the definition, typical definition, regulated definition of food additive, because packaging material, even if it is coming into the food additive, how much amount it is coming, what is the significant amount, that you have to see. Let's see in detail. Under US law and FDA regulation, there is no migration of a packaging component into the food. It is not considered as a food additive. So very much FDA is very clear that whatever the migrating component is not considered as food additive. Key legal and regulatory principles will quickly go through. Legal definition, according to the section 201, Federal Food and Drug Cosmetic Act, food additive is a substance whose intended use results or may reasonably be expected to result in becoming a component of the food. So as such, whatever the additive, it has some functional or technological function will be there that will add to the food. Okay, no migration position. If a substance is appropriately separated from such as functional barrier so that no migration occurs, it is by definition not a food additive. So the packaging material is not a food additive. It does not require any pre-marketing approval. On that food packaging material, you do need not need any pre-marketing approval. If there is a proper barrier between the food and the packaging material. Coming to court precedent, that is Monsanto versus Kennedy, the landmark in particular, you go back and read about this particular case, 1979 case, where the court has rejected the FDA argument that mere contact, just contact automatically implies impregation. They did not agree. The court ruled that for a substance to be food additive, the FDA must show it migrates into the food in more than insignificant amounts. So the amount which is reaching into the food product, that is also very important. And what are the different exceptions? We'll see substances used in food contact material that migrate at levels below the threshold of regulation. So this is again very important concept is there. TOR concept is there. You can pause and you can read in detail about this TOR. Generally, which is less than 0.5 parts per billion may also be exempted from the being regulated as a food additive. So any component which is below TOR, that is 0.5, that will also not be considered as food additive. So what are the important FDA rules which falls under this food packaging? So you read about 21 CFR, GRAS status, TOR, just now we discussed about this one, and FCN. Any new material is there, then it has to be done a proper toxicology studies should be done, then only it has to be accepted by the FDA as a food additive. So along with that, also read about this GRAS guideline, 21 CFR, the food contact articles, and this additives, ingredients, and grass packaging. All these are part of DABT brochure and exam syllabus only. So you can go to website and read this particular. You can download these documents and read, because these are 10 to 12 pages documents are there that you have to read in detail, which I cannot compile in this particular presentation. Okay, hope from this video you were able to learn about food additives, important regulatory agencies, Delaney Clause, USDA. Um, Always remember, and uncertainty factors, modifying factor, the correction factors, how they can be increased or decreased. Okay, thank you so much. Be curious. For any questions, you can always write a mail to arya.priyanka18@gmail.com. Like, subscribe, and follow my YouTube channel Toxicology on Board. All the best for your exam.